right, good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Not sure what time it is for you, but we are here today with Chad. It's been so long. It's like we've been dead and we just came back to life. Happy Easter, everyone. Hello, Chad.
Hello, guys.
All right, so it's been forever since we got together and actually started recording for discussing things, and that brought us a bit of nostalgia. And nostalgia is kind of our topic for today. So, Chad, right now there seems to be a lot of old games being re-released. What do you think is happening?
Yeah, so far we got like last year we had Sony releasing the PlayStation PS1 Classic.
And that was like awful.
It was like a bad some bad decisions on certain setups for their games. Like for example, I think the emulation wasn't really that good,
Okay.
and they're using the European version, which is
yes, the PAL
a lot of
version.
issues on frame rates.
Yeah. So for those not in the know, the PS1 Classic has an assortment of games. Some of them are NTSC, which is meant for Asia, and another set is PAL, which is meant for Europe. So Asia and America, and then Europe. And the Europe versions all have frame rate issues.
Yeah.
All of them. And like that's like the worst you can get in a game, right? So that's why PS1 Classic was like, no. It's just a no for me, right?
Yeah, but also prior to that, like a few years back, before Sony decided to release the PS1 Classic, Nintendo decided to release first the Famicom Classic or the Nintendo Entertainment System Classic, or
And-
actually Mini, sorry.
Yeah, then
And then a year after, they released the Super NES or the Super Famicom Mini, and there was a lot of interest for these two platforms.
yeah, those two were celebrated.
Yeah, and like it's a good way for the old school gamers to appreciate their favorite classics and also to introduce to the newer generation of gamers on how these games were look like a few years back.
Like, are newer gamers legitimately interested in the classics?
So far, I think it's a good way. Like, if you're like a dad and you want to
Oh.
introduce this to the kids, I think I have one friend who have a testimonial about that,
Mm-hmm.
where he showed like the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic
Mm-hmm.
to his daughter, and she got hooked. And considering she's like 5 years old or 3 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a good introduction for her to appreciate the other types of games aside from the modern games.
Well, the SNES Classic was. You mentioned a while ago while we were talking in the mall that there was a really big reason why the SNES Classic is basically the best one of them all.
Yeah, well, if we're going to go through that gray line, or probably below that, some enthusiasts rather prefer for the Super Nintendo Classic,
Mhm.
because Nintendo Mini, because it's quite moddable, meaning they could modify the firmware itself and then add the more emulators, especially from the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy, and even the Famicom.
Wait.
And then they put their own collection there.
So if you can install your own ROMs and your own firmware, what's the difference between just emulating on your own PC and playing on the Super NES?
Of course, you have the same experience of actually playing with the real console.
Uh-huh.
Because, yeah, you can get it. You can play it on your laptop. You can play it on maybe on your Raspberry.
Mm-hmm.
But the experience will be different, like in terms of the controller itself,
Okay.
and also the feel. When you're like actually playing on the couch instead on your desk.
Okay, that's true. Because that's one of my problems with when I bought Sekiro. I'm either working or I'm playing Sekiro, and alt tabbing is so easy.
Yeah.
It's such a big
Yeah.
temptation.
Also for computers or maybe desktop and laptop, there's the sense of a distraction.
Yeah.
You have many things to do on your laptop when compared with playing on the console,
Yeah.
because you only just play there.
Messenger never stops, my friend. It never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops. All right. So okay. So let's just go run through a bit more on on these console classics that came out. One of the stranger ones, I think, was the Neo Geo arcade
Yeah, it's basically a tiny arcade cabinet.
Yeah, and it looks fun, but how are you gonna play on that?
It's a weird thing. It's more of like a novelty rather
Mhm.
than the same kind of experience with the NES Mini or the NES Mini. So it's more like for those collectors who wants to have a piece of an archive from Neo Geo.
It's a mini Neo archive machine. It runs on a battery. It runs on a battery, right?
Yeah, I think it runs on a battery or maybe on
AC?
USB.
Okay. Man, but it's so tiny. Like
Yeah,
having
yeah.
your hand hold the stick.
Yeah, and then lately this year we have two major announcements. Like, first, of course, a more positive, like with Sega announcing the Mega Drive or the Genesis Classic.
Oh, Gex. Gex is coming back.
Yeah, so it's like 40 classic games
Mm-hmm.
will be available, and then you'll be experiencing the same type of game controllers from the old ones.
Welcome back, bulky controllers.
Sadly for the US version, they'll be using the standard 3-button layout. I think as compared with the other, I'm not sure, the other versions that they're using the Mega Drive Generation 2 with a 6-button layout. But I could be wrong. Maybe they'll stick with a 3-button layout.
Okay. So, but well, bottom line is Neo Geo is coming back, and probably a smaller version.
Yeah,
Smaller
and
USB
also
powered.
with Sega, I think they're now banking with the nostalgia trip. Like, yeah, they also released last year for different game platforms like the Genesis Collection
Mm-hmm.
with 40 games from their top-selling titles.
For what platform?
It's available on PC, on the PS4, the Xbox, and the Switch. And now they're releasing their nostalgia trip mini console version. But this time, it's a lot different from the Mega Drive or Genesis Collection lineup. So, if you bought the two versions, the one on for different platforms, the game copy, and the other one is the actual mini console, you'll be having different libraries. So, it's like a double win for collectors.
Okay. I mean, if you're a guy who decided one day, like, because of course you're not gonna think about making your consoles a collection at, I don't know, age 9, age 10,
Yeah.
right? And if you're maybe like you're making a lot of dough on the side now, and you just want to have you want to have pieces of your past just lying around in your room so you can just soak in it like every
Yeah.
once in a while. That's it. These things do have that kind of purpose. Do you think that they're popular enough, or they're justified in being produced like this? Because honestly, if you're thinking about practically, you can just emulate on your own,
Yeah.
or you can buy one on eBay. I'm not sure how much they are though.
Well, technically, I think for this kind of trend, it's now, sellable profit.
Mhm.
Like, for example, for Nintendo, when they released the NES Classic or the NES Mini, it sold out really fast that they had to reproduce more batches.
Oh, but the crowd, the internet was like crying out that they were undersupplying on purpose.
Yeah, that's what according to them. And then when they released it, I think they ran out of supplies again. I think the expectation from Nintendo was low,
Mm-hmm.
so they're just trying out the market, but they were really surprised that the demand is really high.
Wait, Nintendo was the first one to do it, right?
Well, as a first party, yeah.
Yeah, they're the first one. Maybe it's because nobody expected the classic, the mini classic, to sell that well. That is why a bunch of other console makers decided, you know what, we'll
Yeah.
do our own.
I think there are some third-party brands that try to produce a mini version from other consoles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, the Atari has a mini version, but it's not as a first-party production. Same goes with the Sega. I think there's this brand called AT Games or At Games that are creating third-party mini versions. But unfortunately, their quality wasn't that good as compared to what we're seeing now with
Okay,
Nintendo.
so we're just gonna have to come to terms with it, Chad.
Yeah.
We old now.
Oh no.
We old.
Oh no.
All right, so we were discussing a while ago what we would consider as old or retro, and for just so that people know what our line of consistency is, it's games and consoles before PS2.
Or technically just before the year 2000.
Yeah, before year 2000.
Or maybe just we stop at 2000, the year 2000, for our bench line for retro games.
So you hear that, people? FF9 is retro gaming.
Well, technically it's still on the PS1, so it's
Yeah,
retro.
it's a retro game. It counts.
I guess we could say that once the next generation of consoles arrive, we could say that the PS2 is now considered retro, I guess.
Probably PS5. Okay, PS5 and Xbox One X. That is such a funny name. It might be our next topic, but I don't think we have enough information at the moment.
Yeah, for now, I guess we heard some confirmation from Sony themselves, like PS4 backward compatibility, and then it's still a disc-based console, and it's gonna be run on AMD architecture.
Yeah, well, that's the released info right now.
Yeah.
But we want to be able, we'll save that for a future discussion when you have something to discuss it against, which is gonna be the Xbox One X. Getting back to the nostalgia trip, so we have a bunch of. So you mentioned a while ago that there's not only classic consoles but classic game collections.
Yeah.
One of the ones I'm pretty excited about is the Guilty Gear collection because I've been playing that game since it started.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna want to have a copy of that on my Switch, and then there's the Mega Man X collection, which I have.
I think it was last year, right?
Yeah, that released last year, and I thought it was an abysmal release.
Well, yeah, it was poorly, I think, for the emulation. There are some input lags.
A lot of input lag, like for a platformer where you have to time your dodges just right.
Yeah.
Not a good thing.
Yeah, we have some other collections that we need to note, like what I mentioned a while ago for Sega, the Mega Drive or the Genesis collection. Like I think it's around $30 or less for 40 games, and you could play it either on your Switch, on PS4, on your PC. And then they also have this individual collection called Sega Ages, where you can also play it on your smartphones and also on PC, but as an individual pricing.
Oh,
so you can just pick what classic games you want and then put it on your library.
All right. Okay. So then there's even the Resident Evil collection that came out after RE7. Right?
Oh yeah, like a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I think for that I think they managed to do some enhancements like HD treatment on other games.
So I have a tiny concern about this. Like, there seems to be a trend. This started at around PS3 age, where people would just release their classics, so to speak, every year. Like I think almost every year there's gonna be the 5th anniversary or whatever of this game, and then they're gonna release a collection or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that do we think that's a healthy practice? It's like enjoy buying your games all over again kind of thing, you know?
Most likely, I think it depends on the publishers or the developers. If they're confident that, for example, this certain IP is still sellable or maybe has more demand, that they decided to re-release old classics and compiled it and to see if it's still, the consumers will still buy it or just ignore it because they said they had this on their previous console. There's no reason for them to buy it, or maybe they want it as their collection. It turns out I think it's more of a positive approach because it also can say that the IP is still strong and it could lead for potential sequels or maybe remakes.
Okay, so you believe it's a net positive, like even though coming clean about it, it's basically milking the cow, right?
Yeah.
It's basically milking the cow.
Technically.
But the net positive you're drawing out of it is even if it's re-released on a current gen console or on PC, there's still a strong if it sells well enough, it tells the companies, the investors, that you know what, this IP is still strong and people are just gonna eat up if you make a new one.
Yeah. It's like it could be a bad thing because the consumers will say, you guys are really lazy. You don't want to create new games. You just want to milk the cow, just overuse your old titles. But I think, like I mentioned a while ago, it could be a potential sequel because there's a demand.
All right. Why don't we try to make a cost-benefit analysis about this? And then maybe we can negotiate what we think is a justifiable way of releasing the classics. Because honestly, there's a danger of stagnating.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Okay, so we've seen that NES was able to perform well, and but in comparison, the Sony Classic one, the PS1 Classic, didn't sell well. Why do we think that happened?
I think there's a lot of factors we could consider here. Is one, Nintendo started that trend.
Okay.
As a first party, that people are still fans of classic consoles, and maybe there's a crazy idea for them to sell like as a novelty, not as a regular release, and they saw the demand, which probably is another basis for fewer stocks available.
Okay.
It's more like a limited edition rather than like a regular release that it could be hundreds of thousands or millions in shipment.
Okay.
And they saw the demand that's really high, that decided to launch the follow-up for the Super NES.
And that sold well too.
Yeah, and I think now they decide to stop it because maybe they know that it's a risky take for them to continue doing it, like for the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, and so on.
Actually, you know what? Yeah, the GameCube does pass as a retro console, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But then we saw this. Sony saw this trend, and they like, you know what? Let's ride this wave, right?
yeah.
And
I think for Sony's take, it's kind of risky because with the PlayStation 1, I think it makes sense because it's also marks for how many years? I think they already set as milestone last year. Like, could be the 20th anniversary of the PlayStation line.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it makes sense for them to release their own version. But the problem is how they executed the hardware.
Yes.
That's the problem, because if they manage to provide a really stable version, it could have sold more. It could have sold more, and people actually, what do you call this? Could demand for a sequel, like a follow-up.
Okay, so it makes indicators for the producers, right? All right. So where do we draw the line? Because there's the NES, the classic NES, and then there's the Neo Geo Arcade, right?
Oh yeah.
There's this. So where do we think is at what point do we think it's pretty acceptable to re-release or to make a classic thing that a person can buy?
I think it's more on recreating the experience. As we compare with the Neo Geo Classic, I think it's not more designed to become like to recreate their experience when they're still young. It's more of a novelty, like it's a part of your collection, and at the same time, it's playable.
So the Neo Geo thing is it's more of a shelf item in my opinion.
Yeah,
it looks like a shelf item to me. Like you put it on your work desk or something, and people, hey, that's a cute thing, but actually play on it with a stick that small, I don't know, man. I don't know. The NES, of course, was in my personal opinion was a very perfect way of presenting the entire thing.
Yeah, it's a good example because one, it's also good as like a desktop display. You can put it on your table. You can display it.
Yeah.
With this small size, it fits well. Second, it's also workable as the actual console. Just it's smaller.
Yeah, it works on HDMI, right?
Yeah, it also works on HDMI. So modern television or maybe modern LED TVs will work.
All right. So there's that. So are we more towards like? Do we think that the Sony itself, the Sony Classic itself, is just a bad release? Is that where we draw the line, or do we where do we think this is what we should get if we're gonna ask for a classic console release?
I think they could have tried a different approach instead of just releasing a mini version. Because if you think about it, with the large library for the PlayStation 1, people had their own top 10.
Okay.
So what they could have done is maybe they release a software version, like the PlayStation Classic Volume 1. Like this one, the first volume is more on platforms. Then the second volume will be more on RPGs. The third will be like fighting games, fourth, and so on. It's a good way, for demand. Or maybe, it's like a collection, a mini collection.
Okay.
Maybe
So
we could say that, some consumers might say that why not just release a PS Classic as a digital release? But if you think about it, it could be more of a novelty for releasing a physical version. Especially if you provide the jewel case, the classic jewel case, and there's the same layout.
all right. So that goes back to your statement that it's all about recreating the experience.
Yeah.
And NES was able to do that, but Sony wasn't.
It's almost, because the problem would... Here's the thing. The design was the same. The controls are still the same, but they ditch out... It's kind of weird. Maybe more of the software choices. because the PlayStation 1 the classic is using the first version of the controller, which is without the DualShock analog pads,
yeah,
right?
that could be a problem. Yeah,
And then they release a Rainbow Six game on the classic, which
needs
is
to,
more optimized on a DualShock, although it's still playable on the original controller, but it's more clunky or more difficult to play.
Yeah, it's really not advisable. So
Yeah,
maybe there was a bit of a disconnect of what they would feature on the console, and how they would present the classic hardware.
yeah. And also, if you notice that in the Japanese version, they had different library for their PlayStation Classic, and some fans from the US aren't really happy.
Yeah, because that would mean that the Japanese got the better ones.
Yeah, actually,
All right. So okay, so we're gonna yeah, it's all about recreating the experience. Neo Geo kind of Neo Geo, yeah.
Neo Geo and Sony.
Yeah, Neo Geo, they kind of quite didn't hit the mark, because if your goal was to recreate the experience, I think the NES and the SNES was the only one that was able to successfully do that.
Also looking forward with Sega's take on that, and if they manage to follow the same approach with the Nintendo,
Mhm.
it could sell well, and maybe we could see a Sega Saturn release sometime in the future.
All right. So a while ago, you kept saying that this is good for people that want to become collectors or just want to make a collection of their childhood.
Yeah.
I guess you could. I'm not so sure if that's a strong argument, in my opinion, because if you want to hold it for the nostalgia itself, just having it, then you'd be better off having the actual cases of the games, the actual console itself.
Mhm.
Because if that's the point, then it's not really making it playable. Then go full authentic, right? Go.
Yeah, it's like what do you call this? It's another way for you to recreate your nostalgia trip with the actual classic consoles. But the problem is that yeah, these are 20-year-old consoles. These are 20-year-old cartridges. There are chances that these aren't working, or it's hard to find nowadays.
So, okay, like if we probably Google like classic NES right now, chances are it's over $1,000.
Yeah, well, if you're lucky, you could get it cheaper. Like you could get it for maybe less than $100, less than $100, or maybe $50. But the condition won't be that good, or there are incomplete accessories.
Okay, when I said $1,000, I'm calling it like working, not discolored, and
Like in a pristine condition.
generally in the pristine condition. Doesn't have to be 100% clean, but working and nothing missing, right?
It's gonna be it's gonna be the hard part, finding the actual unit that is at that condition, and the box is complete, because nowadays you could see retro consoles on sale, but they don't have boxes.
All right. So what you're saying is the fact that getting these classic products, these classic repackagings, is convenient, justifies it for those who want to collect.
Yeah. Well, if you're the hardcore collector that you really want to find those retro consoles in their original form, it's still possible, but don't expect much that they're in top condition, or you might have to shell out a lot of money.
A lot of money, like a lot of money.
And another problem is finding the games.
Man, I have the original Nintendo Zapper, stashed away somewhere in my house. I wonder if I could sell it. I'm pretty sure it works. Haven't touched it since.
I remember my dad has like a console of the Odyssey.
Uh-huh.
I think that's few years, I think more than a decade ago when they found it. But fortunately, it was already defective, so it's not playable. What's gonna be a good collection if you're a hardcore collector?
All right. So I guess the last thing we want to cover is: do you really think new gen gamers are gonna be really into these classic releases?
I think it's possible, because for being a gamer, it's not about going for which is the most popular or just becoming popular because of what the games are you're playing. It depends on your taste. There are some gamers, for example, for the new gens, who prefer classic like pixel art visuals, 2D, or more simplified presentations. So it could be like a viable. It's a good introduction for them to try out the classic games, or maybe those people who want to experience the old games, like what makes it different from the games today from the yesterdays or the yesteryears.
Okay, so it's like playing through a history book.
Yeah.
then.
Because of course, people who are more interested in gaming will try to experiment with different games.
Okay.
They want to learn more. Like for example, what makes it different from the Final Fantasy today, from the PlayStation era, PS1 era, from the Super NES era. Like the immersion, the experience, the story making, the lore. What makes it different from each of them? What makes them unique from each other?
Okay.
Because people say that the golden years are from the PlayStation. Oh no, golden years are from the Super NES. They have their own taste, but the experience will be different.
But you know, I don't know if this is gonna be like generally really popular thing, right? Maybe out of 100 people, maybe five people might be into it, and
Yeah,
I'm not sure if maybe it's good for study for those who want to really learn how the games are made, or maybe how they're designed, because you're down to basics, right? There's so much limitation on
Yeah.
old hardware, so people need to get creative. But like I don't know, I'm not sure. If I were to recommend games for a new generation, I would pick out something that they would be able to adjust well to, instead of giving them something that's not gonna tell them how to play at all and then kill them in like 5 seconds.
yeah. Although it's another way for them to introducing games, but also you could also think of it a different way.
You know?
It's also a good way to reconnect with your family members, to your friends or old friends, especially those who are not keen into playing the newer gen of games or the latest games.
Okay.
Or maybe want to have a bonding moment with your families who are who are into the classic consoles before and were not interested in the games today.
So it becomes a social channel
Yeah,
of sorts. All right, that sounds like an interesting take on it. Like you could definitely use it for that. Yeah, I guess. Like, but I don't know. That I think the classics are more for nostalgia and archiving. I'm
Yeah.
not so sure. And yes, of course, the third part was the market research that people don't really know. Don't really
if you
know.
notice also for the classic versions, like the retro consoles, they now incorporate some aspects from the modern gaming, like clouds, save slots.
Oh yeah, that makes games so much easier.
Yeah, and also it's playable now on modern TVs with the HDMI port, and also it's much more portable.
Mhm.
It's more like a party. You can also treat it as like a party game. Like you bring it with your friends, your nightly drinking session, or maybe hang out
All right.
somewhere.
So, well, if you since you think it's a huge net positive, in your opinion, it's a huge net positive. Like, if people are curious about the retro games, the older games, or what titles or which ones would you really recommend? Like your top three?
I think for me, if, for example, you want to go really old school and to learn more of the basics, they should probably start with Super Mario Brothers, the first.
Super Mario Brothers 1.
Yeah, it's a
Like
good
Warp
one.
Zone game.
Yeah, they could experience some of the aspects of the basic in gaming, and then there's some of the parts there, like for example, you can cheat your way to jumping to the next
Yeah.
different worlds.
Shortcuts. They're
Yeah, the shortcuts, a lot of things, and
So-
also a good introduction on the basics on the gameplay on the first level.
Okay.
I think the second one, probably, we could go with Crash Bandicoot.
Crash Bandicoot. Yeah. Man, that was like the first platformer I went hardcore on.
It's like more jumping from the 2D aspects to 3D, and the gameplay more of a platform type.
Mhm.
It's pretty much basic that people can understand it, and can understand it, and then also experience the difficulty curve
Mhm.
from different levels. Make them rethink how they approach their level
Okay.
different ways. And the third one is, if they want to go more into RPGs, I guess we can say they could try.
Chrono Trigger.
Oh well, they could try either Final Fantasy 7 or 9.
9 is actually a pretty
Actually,
good
we
one.
could why not we go with 9?
Yeah, it's good.
Because it's a combination of the old school Final Fantasy from the
Uh-huh.
SNES era and jumping into the modern at that time for the PlayStation. So
Yeah.
it's a good combination of old school and new school,
Okay.
but still maintain that what makes Final Fantasy really great in terms of lore, story, gameplay, and
Uh-huh.
everything. Although you could get it in different platforms right now for the PC, Switch, PS4, everything. So you can buy it anywhere. As compared, like for example, with Crash right now, is that there are two versions. You can get the newer remaster, or maybe probably the remake,
The Insane Trilogy.
the Insane Trilogy, or you could go with the PS1 classic.
Both are hard.
Yeah, both are hard. For Super Mario Brothers 1, you can get it on the NES Mini, or you could get it on the archives from the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, the Switch. I mean, yeah, it's actually you get it for free, and to be honest, you're amused for at least 5 to 10
Yeah.
minutes.
Also,
per
technically,
game.
you can also buy it separately if you don't want to go with the subscription model.
Yeah.
It's like for $7 or $5.
All right. So, okay. I guess to close it out, my top three. I already mentioned number one, which is like the Guilty Gear collection, because I've been a fan of Guilty Gear since Guilty Gear PS1. And it literally like you just watch how it evolves. Just play a few rounds of Guilty Gear 1, then Guilty Gear X, Double X, Accent Core, all that. You're gonna see how it evolves and how it gets more and more ridiculous, and then it resets after when it lands in the PS4. Next would be okay, that's probably gonna be SquareSoft titles because I was generally a JRPG player back then. One would be Brave Fencer Musashi on
Yeah, it's a
PS1.
good game.
Like excellent adventure game. I don't know how they screwed up the remake. They just screwed it up in PS2, man.
Oh yeah, it's a remake or a sequel.
It repeats the story. Technically, it's technically a sequel, but not really. It's hard to
Oh,
explain.
so weird.
It's I would just call it a reboot, I guess.
Yeah.
But Brave Fencer Musashi on PS1, wonderful game. What would be the third one? Okay, I'm always gonna. If you're gonna ask me about classic games, I'm always gonna miss. It's gonna be Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh yeah.
One of them, huge classic for me. Mature story, great abilities, abusable system. It gets so many things right in one go. I played it, I don't know how many times by now. I even played it on the PSP, and then I played it again on the PS Vita.
You can also play it on the iPad.
Again, you can play it on your phone, but none of them emulate it quite well compared to PS1, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. They just haven't been able to, in my personal opinion, they just haven't been able to make a sequel that I would call a worthy sequel for Final Fantasy Tactics. It's never been as good as the first one.
Probably we could see like another spin-off or maybe a sequel soon.
Maybe. But anyway, yeah, those are my top three nostalgia trips for if anybody is asking.
Yeah, probably we could discuss more on JRPGs in the future. It's like an interesting topic.
Actually, yeah, so we're here around the end. Might as well talk about the ones that I'm planning to do next. So, we're planning to let people know more about our tastes in gaming, so they can understand where our opinions are coming from, or if they agree with it or not. So, I'm gonna probably force Chad to sit on the mic again.
Oh, could probably do it again somewhere in a car parked in a remote area in the city.
You make it sound so fishy, Chad. What the heck?
No man, we have friends who do that.
Anyway, yeah, we're gonna it's gonna be maybe 6 up to 9 games that greatly influence our tastes. That's what's gonna be coming next. Then I don't know how long we're gonna take to talk about all of that, but
We'll see.
but we're gonna try. All right, so I guess that's it. Let's say you have anything else you'd like to catch.
Well, so far we can expect more, content in the coming days. We got a lot of some backlog, so please bear with us.
Yeah, work has been super busy for all of us. I even haven't been able to live stream. Like, goodness. But we are back from the dead. We are back from the dead, and
We're dead.
well, technically, we're content dead, I guess. And we've been behind. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's gonna be the thing. Anyway, we're planning to do more because this is the actual stuff we love to do, and hopefully we get to be successful in these endeavors. Anyway, for those of you who are looking forward to more content, do check us out on Facebook. That is where you'll find all of our updates. We also have a Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel which we're trying to revive, and this should be on Spotify.
Yeah, hopefully we'll figure out how to get our podcast episodes on Spotify.
All right,
And also we have our Instagram, so we could also share some of our coverage.
and memes. Me.
Yeah, with memes.
I like the post, boys. Anyway, yeah, that's it. So, thanks for joining us, Chad. I'm Alan, also known as Lentropy, but whichever name you want to go with. That's it. That's gonna be it for now. So, thanks again. We'll see you next time, and do check us out.
Bye.